Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to open up a reel that was popular for a few years and then kind of went away, and we'll tell you a little bit of the story behind it. This is the Jarvis Walker. It's the Royal Gold 3500. The Royal Gold series was popular, as was Jarvis Walker. Jarvis Walker as a brand was a Penn Worldwide company, and I believe they were manufactured or sold in the Australian marketplace. And folks up here in the U.S. became aware of them and started importing them, and they started competing against the Penn brand straight up. And ultimately the Walker brand was sold to Bimini Products, the maker of tsunami reels, and eventually got discontinued. But the reason we're going to work on this one today is to show you this reel, the quality behind it. We're going to also tune it up, and we're going to take a look at it because it's one of the reels that you may find easily enough at a fishing flea market or a tag sale, because the reel is certainly more than 5 years old, and this one happens to be in good condition. So most of the time these reels with just a little bit of TLC go a long way and can last, quite a long time. So we're going to start by doing a couple of things. We're going to take the handle off. This is a through screw handle, and you can tell that because the nut on the back side of the handle turns when you turn the handle, and that's true for most of these to figure out whether it's a screw into the main drive handle, like a pen, most pens, and it's easy enough to figure out that this one goes through. So what I do is I take the screw nut off and I put that into the handle so I don't lose it without losing the handle, and I put it into a parts bucket. And the parts bucket here is a simple tray made from the bottom of a milk jug. That helps me keep all the small pieces and parts in one place so that when I go to do the reassembly I know where to look. So this is a half plate. It's a plate that stops at the base of the rotor. Some plates go through where you have to remove the rotor in order to remove the side gear plate. So in this case, this can be taken apart by removing the 4 screws. And these are Phillips head, but a flat screwdriver works in these as well. Sometimes a flat screwdriver grips it a little bit better. Sometimes a smaller Phillips head will work. And this reel says it's got 9 ball bearings in it, and we always get into a debate around the shop about how many do you really need. And my guess is there's a lot of ball bearings up on the top of this reel and the spool, and probably 1 in the handle and 1 on the wire bail. But the answer I typically give folks is start with 3. As long as the 3 are in the right place, which they usually are. It seems to be a priority. If you have a 1 ball bearing reel, it's typically a ball bearing that's on the pinion gear. If you have a 2 ball bearing reel, it's usually on the handle side or the drive side of the main gear. If you have a 3 ball bearing reel, it's probably both sides of the main gear. And then after that, they could be on a crosswind block, could be, and this looks like it is, a ball bearing on the bail wire. There's probably several ball bearings in the spool here. There's typically a ball bearing on the handle. This one has a ball bearing on the handle. So ball bearings add price to the reel. After a while, I think it's a little return for the investment, but the more the merrier, I guess, is the thought. And a lot of people will buy a reel based on the number of bearings, not necessarily if they're very useful or not. So I've taken the 4 pieces of the side plate out. That allows me to have access to the gear drives underneath here, and we're going to go lube this reel. So I'm working the cross block down so that I can take the shaft out. Now sometimes you can pull that main gear without taking the spool shaft off. I just make it a practice to always take that spool shaft out, spool assembly, because I'm going to lubricate that bearing up top anyway. So if you remove that from the crosswind block, you can pull the shaft right out. No need to remove the spool from that. With that, then we can take the bearing off of this, and then we can take the main gear out. We can check for dirt. In this case, this reel is very clean, and it looks like it's got some good lubrication to it. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of oil onto the crosswind on the post there. That's what's controlling this one. There's no bearing behind that. I'm also going to lube the bearing back here. If that was dirty, I would take that bearing out and clean it off, but it's a very clean assembly here. And it looks like we just need some lubrication on the pinion gear up top there. So I'm going to go ahead and use grease. And the grease that I use is a blue grease. In this case, I use Penn Precision Reel Grease, but every manufacturer has it out there, as well as some third-party companies. As long as it's designed for fishing reels, it'll all work. And then I'm going to put some blue grease onto the crosswind gear. And we've already oiled up the stud underneath. The lube on this crosswind gear is so that this crosswind block runs efficiently. I'm also going to put just a little bit of blue grease into the channel on that crosswind block, and then I'm just going to reset that in here. I'm going to turn around and drive my attention now to the main gear. Very dry. That needs some lubrication. And again, this is a 5-year-old reel, probably hasn't been serviced since it was purchased, looking at the fact that there's very little grease in any of this. And I'm just going to spread a little bit around that. I'm also checking the teeth for abnormal wear as I do this, and they all look nice and even. Same thing has to be done with the teeth in the back here. That's what's going to drive your spool gear or your spool shaft up and down by way of that crosswind assembly. And if there's a broken or a missing tooth there, your spool's not going to go up and down. All right, so with that, we've oiled that back one. We've lubed the main shaft there, lubed the crosswind gear and the crosswind block and the main gear. Now that bearing up top is going to be sitting on the base of this pinion gear, so one of the ways you can oil, or at least start to oil it, is to put a drop on the bottom and just spin that top carrier a little bit. You'll actually see the ball bearings moving there as you do that. And then I'm going to reinstall the main gear here. Okay, now I'm going to go up top here while I have this open. We're going to go look at the top of this. Now the only purpose to this one would be to clean it out if there was an issue with that, and this reel seems very clean. And it would also be to replace it, like an anti-reverse bearing, for example, would be something that would be done that way. But it doesn't hurt to take this apart, see what's going on up there, and make any adjustments as needed. So, as you can tell, I got a lot of wrenches. We're trying to find the right one here. So much for stop setup and getting something done ahead of time. So you just have to bear with me momentarily. So I like to keep a lot of wrenches on hand because each manufacturer does it a little bit differently. And again, the only consequence here is that if you're filming a video, you take an extra minute or two and you look foolish from time to time. Interestingly enough, this one spins by rotating it in a right-hand clockwise rotation. That's the opposite of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. A lot of reel manufacturers do that to compensate for the spin. This is your anti-reverse mechanism up top here. We're going to just put a couple of drops of oil on that spool, and I'm going to put a little oil in that spool shaft as well. So this is clean. That's what I wanted to find out there, is was it clean or not? It is, and we just did some lubrication. We're going to go reinstall the nut now, and again, it's opposite on this reel of the way you would normally do it. So it's counterclockwise, which is normally how you remove a nut. And in this case, it's how you tighten a nut. Interestingly enough, the old Chrysler automobiles of the 60s and 70s used to have their left side would have the nuts, the lug nuts on the car, thread reverse. The idea there is that it goes with the rotation of the tire and can't spin free. All right, once we did that, then we're going to reinsert the assembly here. We're going to bring it down into the crosswind block. It's just a matter of truing this up now. You'll notice I'm wearing a protective glove on my left hand. I do that as a general practice, and I do that because I want to keep the contaminants off of my hand if possible. I don't wear one on my right side because it seems to, with me anyway, impede my grasp of tools and the like. but it's certainly something that can be considered if you're concerned about the contamination and getting that stuff on your skin. So we did that. Now we're going to lube this bearing. So we've seen 3 bearings so far. We've seen the 2 on the cross post and the main gear, and 1 up on the pinion gear, which again, if I was to say what is the important ones, it's those 3. Okay, so now we're going to come back and put the side plate on. Those have the four screws, and again, it's easy if you put them into the parts bucket, you know where to find them. So I would encourage you to go destroy a milk jug or any other kind of coffee can or anything that that you have laying around that can work this way, because it's going to save you time and energy and effort in looking for the screws later on. So I've been doing this for years, and I find it's a blessing to just have the pieces in one place. I've probably spent enough time on my hands and knees on the floor looking for something that got brushed off and had fallen to the ground. So we're going to just tighten these down. So right now I like what I see. It's a nice 3500 size reel. It seems like everybody for some reason picked black and gold as the color scheme for their upper models at that time. Certainly the Penn Spinfishers were black and gold. You had black and gold on the Daiwa BG series, black and gold, and this one, this is RG. They're calling it Royal Gold, but you know, regardless, it seems to be the color scheme that suggested that there was a higher quality for it for some reason. The other series that Jarvis Walker made, interestingly enough, was the Silver Series, and sure enough, Penn made a Silver Series too at the time, with the Penn 105s and so on. So again, it was almost a direct competition, and it used to be that the reels said when it was Penn Worldwide Company, so that just gave it even more credibility in terms of what you were buying there, and helped launch the product. But I think in the end it was probably to their detriment. So okay, and I'm not a historian there, I don't know for certain, but that would be my guess as to why this brand was sold off and then eventually just discontinued, as Bimini Products, I believe, took the design of it, because I've seen some Jarvis Walkers and some Tsunami reels that were identical other than the names on the side plates. So I'm thinking that they probably took the design of some of these and manufactured them under the Tsunami brand for a while. And now I believe that the Tsunamis are just independently done. Okay, so here's the proof, I guess, that there's a lot of ball bearings around. There's a ball bearing that's a shaft bearing sitting here. And if we look underneath, there's several ball bearings in the spool. And this one does look like it has a little bit of dirt in there, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe that down with a paper towel. And again, it's advertised as 9 ball bearings, and I haven't taken the time to count the number in the spool, but there's probably 3 or 4 in the spool as well. Same idea. If it's a bearing, you want to lubricate it with oil. If you lubricate it with the blue grease, especially up top here when you get into the surf and you start throwing sand and dirt and water in there, it's going to clog the blue grease. I'm just going to go underneath now. We're going to take a look at what we have for drags, and we'll lubricate the drags if required. This is a standard setup for a spinning reel. It has a retainer clip inside the spool. That's what I just removed there. It is a spring clip, so you have to be careful when you take it out. And then we'll just remove that drag stack there with, I have a small screwdriver. You can also do it probably just by turning the reel upside down and knocking them out. Okay, so here's another ball bearing that just came out that sits on the back end of the spool, or top end of the spool here. So we had one on the bottom, one on the top. As long as it's there, we'll go oil that. And these are Teflon drags, I've noticed as I'm pulling them out. And you notice they kept the stack together. Good time to tell you, if you don't recall, or you haven't worked on reels, or you're a little bit shy about what you're doing, take pictures of the reels along the way and the steps that you're removing the pieces and parts, and that way you can go back and reference them. And of course, somebody's probably out there figuring I'm not taking pictures of this. Well, one, I know what I'm doing, but two, I am taking pictures. I got the video there if I really get stumped. So the middle metal washer is eared. It has little tags on both sides, and they slip into the groove, and that's always in the middle of the drag stack. Here's another one of those Teflon washers. So there's three types of washers. There's a Teflon, there's a felt, and there's a composite, or like a Carbonex. So on the Teflon you do nothing. On the felt you oil the washers, and on the composites, like a Carbonex washer or an HT100 washer from Penn, you use a drag grease. The drag greases I prefer when I need to use that is a Cal's Universal Drag Grease. All right, spool's done. So the reel's done after I just worked this back in, tighten it up. And so we learned a couple of things. We learned that, you know, more, I guess, is better, but not necessarily worth the cost from time to time. It's a nice little reel. Nice little reel for a 3500 series. It's good for inshore. It's good for light ocean. It's good for the Great Lakes. It's good for heavier river applications, casting applications. It's got the long cast spool, and I can see why it would compete against the Penn reels at the time. So I hope that's been helpful. We've taken it apart. We've seen the quality of craftsmanship inside it. We've seen where the ball bearings are. We had a conversation about how to use the lubrications, where to lube with grease, where to lube with oil, how to do the drag stacks, and what drags require lubrication and which do not. And that's kind of the purpose of my videos. It's to not only show you a reel that you may have that you're considering service, but maybe you're considering buying the reel, or just trying to figure out the best way to maintain the reels that you already have. And then I like to do reviews. I like to do the ones that you know, you may find at a flea market or a garage sale or tag sale or the like, and provide you the information that may be critical in your decision making. So I hope that's helped. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching the video.